On this path, effort never goes to waste, and there is no failure. Even a little effort towards spiritual awareness will protect you from the greatest fear. That's one of the teachings from the Bhagavad Gita. What's up, everyone? My name is Ishaan, if you don't know me, and welcome to the video. I've been going through some challenging times in my current life, and whenever that happens, I turn to my learnings that I've absorbed and embodied over the past couple years. And one of the main sources of that is the Bhagavad Gita. Now, if you don't know, the Bhagavad Gita is a spiritual text. It's part of the Hindu culture and the Hindu traditional realm, but at its core, it's a spiritual text that is applicable for humans as a whole and life in general. And what is the Gita? I should probably explain that. The Gita is a conversation between Krishna, which is considered the creator of the universe, of everything there is. So in other words, God, if you will. So the conversation is between Krishna and Arjun. Arjun is a warrior that's currently in the battlefield and is entering a fight where he has to go against his brothers, his teachers, like people that he holds very dear. And he's having this internal conflict of, I'm a warrior, my purpose in this fight is to fight, but I'm conflicted because on the other side are people that I love and hold dear to me. So I don't know what to do. And in this period, Krishna reveals his true divine essence to Arjun to impart his spiritual teachings and wisdom as to how humans can go about life and what kind of actions you can take to not feel or to embrace the internal conflict and grow from it. And this whole battle thing is, this whole battle is actually the epic tale of Mahabharata, which, look it up if you don't know what it is. But for the relevance of what we're about to get into, it doesn't really matter to know like the full context. Of course, the Bhagavad Gita has been, rewritten several times since the inception, and there's been many people who have translated it in English. Like, I think it's one of the most famous spiritual texts to be translated in English, like as many times as it has been. And I'm currently reading this translated version. I've read a couple of other ones in the past, and everyone interprets it a little differently. So every time I read a different one, I'm getting a different learning, or I'm getting it from a different perspective, and it's always fascinating to see that. But even now, dude, after reading the Gita a few times, even like the original version, like I've been reading that one as well, I always get something new out of it, regardless of how I read it, when I read it, what parts I read. I don't even know how that's possible, but every time I read it, I learn something that I'm like, wow, this is something that I can continue to practice. This is something that I can continue to embody. Since I have been definitely been a little bit more emotional the past couple of days and today, which is partially why I'm also recording the videos, because it really does help me process my feelings. And it is also a reminder that none of my progress that I've worked on over the past couple of years or anything like that doesn't go away at all. In fact, this challenge, this opportunity is now the time to put these learnings and practices that I've developed over the years into use. And if I don't employ it and don't utilize my skill set, that just doesn't make sense, bro. So today we're gonna do something interesting that I haven't done on the channel before, or I haven't done in any of my videos before, but I have thought about it several times in the past, and I was just like, oh, like it's gonna be weird if I do this or that. But today I feel the inner calling to do it, so I will. We're gonna read some aspects or some pages of the Gita, and I'll just comment on how I'm perceiving certain things. and we'll go from there. Hopefully it gives you an insight as to what kind of knowledge this text holds, and if it's something that might align with your journey as well, and whether you'd want to start reading it yourself. At its core, the Gita is about the war within. It's about tuning out external stuff and tuning in internally to really live the life that's authentic to you and is fulfilling. And there are certain guidelines that I think what separates Gita from religious texts is that there are certain rights or wrongs, but even in that case, the goal never changes. The goal is self-realization, and even through the wrong things like wrong decisions and living the wrong path, you can reach to the path of self-realization over the course of lifetimes. But there's no part of Gita that's like, oh, this is really, really bad, like don't do this, shouldn't do this, otherwise you're going to hell. Like there's nothing like that, and it's very specific yet vague and generalized at the same time. Let's just dive right in. So I'm gonna read some of chapter 6, the practice of meditation. Currently I'll read off some stuff that the author has written about the chapter, and then I'll head into some of the actual translated verses from the Gita. In climbing this mountain, willpower, self-help, and intense personal effort are absolute essentials. The literal translation of verse 5 is, quote, one should lift oneself up by one's self, a play on the word Atma, which can mean the highest self as well as self in the ordinary sense. One's self is thus one's friend or one's own enemy. The lower self is self-will, will in the negative, selfish sense, an unruly will twisted toward self-aggrandizement is an enemy lurking right inside the fort where it can do the most damage. But those who have conquered themselves by themselves have their truest friend in the self. Only those who have genuine self-discipline, who are self-conquered, live in peace. And this one hit me so hard this morning when I first read it, because that is something that I've been trying to develop over the past few years. Like, self-discipline is something that's so important to me, and it feels extremely validating that spiritually that is the way to go about life, is to conquer oneself and one's mind, for the mind is very turbulent, and realizing your higher self and embodying that higher version of you. But those who have conquered themselves by themselves have their truest friend in the self. I love that. But this is a lifelong journey. Like I don't think you ever really come to a point where you've conquered yourself completely, or perhaps there is, and I'm just thinking from a limiting perspective. Perhaps. These, Krishna says, are true yogis. They cannot harbor any malice, cannot even bring themselves to look upon anyone as an enemy. They are sammabuddhi, of equable mind. The true yogis, who are fully integrated on all levels of consciousness, feel everyone's joy and sorrow just as if it were their own. They see the self in all beings everywhere. And that's the last part, feel everyone's joy and sorrow just as if it were their own, is, I think, alluding, or I perceive it alluding to being an empath and being able to read energies, being able to feel the emotions and that other people are feeling, and that's something that I've had ever since I was younger. Like, I can still feel it to this day. When I step into certain situations, I see that I can easily absorb the energy of the room and adapt to the situation for what it is. have to agree as well, where when you're self-conquered, when you're self-disciplined, and you're so focused on the war within, how can you harbor any hate or malice or see someone else as an enemy when you realize that the the judgment that you're placing on someone else is you just placing judgment on yourself, like, and also vice versa. If you place judgment on yourself, you're placing the judgment on others as well, and it's just like a cyclical thing. But I think Gita, that's how I see it from a human perspective. But I think what this right here Gita is saying is that there's a divine essence in all of us, and that divine essence is the same. Like, that soul or that soul energy is the same. So when you judge someone else's soul energy, you're just judging yourself, because that's also part of who you are. And separation between us from in these physical bodies is just a mere illusion. This probably sounds woo-woo to some people, but we keep going. Let's read some of the verses now, since that was the translation, or that was the commentary and interpretation of the author. Chapter 6, the practice of meditation. It is not those, Krishna says, it is not those who lack energy or refrain from action, but those who work without expectation of reward, who attain the goal of meditation. Theirs is true renunciation. Therefore, Arjun, you should understand that renunciation and the performance of selfless service are the same. Those who cannot renounce attachment to the results of their work are far from the path. This brings in some of the previous learnings that they've mentioned, that Krishna has mentioned in the previous chapters. But the part that I want to focus on right now is. Oh, also, I didn't read this earlier. Like, I read the commentary of the author, but I didn't actually read the verses. So this is also my first time reading it in this book. This part is saying that you have to engage in your material duties and responsibilities without the expectation of receiving a reward or the fruits of your labor. And if you're not able to, and if you're able to renounce those results and actually engage in the actions without any attachment to the results or desires or outcomes, that's you practicing meditation, a different kind than what you would imagine, like sitting and closing your eyes. But you're focused on one thing, and that's what the point of meditation is. So, or some of the meditations at least. And I think that's what I gather from this verse. Of course, it hits on other things where you should understand that renunciation and the performance of selfless service are the same, which kind of goes back to the selfless service part, which has been mentioned in previous chapters. But we can revisit this at a later time when if I also read the previous chapters on camera again. For aspirants who want to climb the mountain of spiritual awareness, the path is selfless work. For those who have ascended to yoga, the path is stillness and peace. When you have freed yourself from attachment to the results of work and from desires for the enjoyment of sense objects, you will ascend to the unitive state. At its core, I think, again, it's just trying to say that the goal is self-realization through selfless work without attachment to outcomes, without attachment to desires of the five senses that we have in the human body and in this material world. And in order to transcend that, in order to ascend that, we have to let go of the attachment to the results of work and the desires of the senses to realize the unitive state. reshape yourself through the power of your will. Never let yourself be degraded by self-will. The will is the only friend of the self, and the will is the only enemy of the self. Oh my god, that shit was crazy good, yo. That was nuts, because I just read that and my mind translated this as, you need to have self-respect, motherfucker. If you don't have self-respect and you don't take actions from a place of self-respect, then yourself is gonna become the enemy. But if you take actions that align with your self-respect, then yourself becomes your friend. And that's the dichotomy I see, and I'm like, yes. If I let myself be degraded by my self-will, by making choices and actions that don't align with my values and don't align with my respect, then slowly and gradually the self will become my enemy, because I'll start to resent myself. And this is something I've experienced in the past, bro, several times. And to be honest, I still experience this because I'm a fucking human, and I'm only 24. Like, I'm still making so many mistakes, and I'm learning along the way. I'm not supposed to have all the answers. I have a lot of answers. I have like answers than I can even imagine at this age. But yet I make mistakes, and I have to keep going to keep building the self-respect and conquering myself, because I'm realizing that when I go through the challenging times, I do rely on certain unhealthy habits, and I rely on external things to make me feel good or to make me feel distracted, when really that needs to come from within. That needs to come from the self. The distraction, the redirection of the energy, it needs to come from me. It can't come from external stuff. And if it comes from external stuff, it's short-lived, it's temporary, it's not going to be the final answer, because it's never permanent. But if it comes from within, it's there. It's the self. It's the higher self. And everyone can take external material rewards from you at any time, bro. Shit is so temporary. But what you have in here, no one can ever take that away from you. And I think that's the part I love the most about our current society and human life, is we have so much crazy stuff going on at all times, dude. And the war is being able to separate that from what's within. That one sits well with me, man. Self-respect is important. To those who have conquered themselves, the will is a friend, but it is the enemy of those who have not found the self within them. Again, it's self-realization. If you're not in tune with your higher self, if you're not deriving your actions from a place of embodying your better version, better self, higher self, your true natural essence, then you're doing yourself a disservice. And slowly that connection is going to keep dwindling. It never goes away. The connection with your true self is always there. It's just that programming and societal things have gotten in the way of you recognizing that. And really, it's not about a matter of connecting with your true self. It's a matter of letting go of all the things that are in the way or pulling you back from that connection. Because that connection is inherently there, bro. That shit is there. It never goes away. It's there. May dwindle, may reach peak intensity at some points and not at others, but it's always there. And like I said, you just have to let go of the things, people, experiences that are either pulling you from that connection or are just in the way of that connection with your higher self. The supreme reality stands revealed in the consciousness of those who have conquered themselves. They live in peace, alike in cold and heat, pleasure and pain, praise and blame. They are completely fulfilled by spiritual wisdom and self-realization. Having conquered their senses, they have climbed to the summit of human consciousness. To such people, a clod of dirt, a stone, and gold are the same. They are equally disposed to family, enemies, and friends, to those who support them, and those who are hostile, to the good and the evil alike. Because they are impartial, they rise to great heights. Those who aspire to the state of yoga should seek the self in inner solitude through meditation. With body and mind controlled, they should constantly practice one pointedness, free from expectations and attachment to material possessions. And I think I'll wrap up the verses there because then it goes into how you should meditate, or a little bit of that. I think the last three verses that I just read reiterate the same points of how you need to maintain steadfastness, how you need to be detached from outcomes and results, and you need to see everything as just is without judging or attaching good, bad, evil, nice. Like, you need to just see things as is and flow with it. And that's something I needed to be reminded of today for sure. Yeah, I'll wrap up the verses there. That was extremely insightful for me. Being able to read that, being able to talk about it, I really enjoyed that. If you made it this far into the video, I appreciate you tuning in, and I really hope that you got a glimpse of what the Gita is about, and whether it's something that might be able to help you on your spiritual journey as well. I mean, chances are that if you watched the video this far, you either just like really want to support me, or you were genuinely interested in learning about what the Gita had to say. And in either case, I appreciate you tuning in. I really hope you got something new out of this video. If you would want me to keep making more reading style videos, let me know in the comments below, and I'll catch you in the next one.